So we're going to get going. First of all, welcome everybody. This is the fourth webinar that I'm going to be doing during the lockdown that we've been experiencing. The first webinar was choosing a trainer. If any of you've got any questions, please contact me directly. I'm not going to get into any questions and answers with regards to the choosing of a trainer. The second one was the importance of choosing the correct course or course curriculum. Once again, if you have any questions pertaining to that, you can ask me or just pop onto my YouTube account and check out the previous webinars. The previous webinar, webinar number 3, was equipment or training equipment, and I covered primarily the range bag and other paraphernalia that you'd require for a handgun, a shotgun, and a self-loading rifle. I'm sure that you guys feel the benefit of watching that one was well worth it. This evening, I'm going to cover everything else on the spectrum, and once again, I can show you that I've got my lecture notes. I don't just pitch up and wing it. Believe it or not, I actually have a menu. And I'm going to start this one by saying what I'm going to cover tonight is everything except projectile throwing weapons, in terms of the equipment that's required for you to attend a course either with myself or someone like myself that's going to present good quality training. The first thing that we need to do, just quickly get off the bat before we get into all the cool stuff lying on the table in front of me, is a good quality first aid kit when attending these courses. A personal first aid kit known as an IFAK, an individual first aid kit, should accompany everything that we're going to talk about tonight, as I covered in the previous webinar with regards to projectile throwing weapons. Included in that kit, you should include some form of disinfectant, not just for COVID-19, but just because you're going to be sweating all over your own gear. You're going to be sweating over gear that's going to come into contact with your training partner or partners. And you want to make sure that you don't pick up any infections and that with regards to coming into close contact with other people, especially when we're rolling around on the floor. So what I discussed on the first equipment webinar, which was the last one I'd run, webinar number 3, is that you should go to the shooting range or any training that you're going to do with firearms with a personal individual first aid kit. Very important. This specific first aid kit, you would need to add a couple of things, like, for example, the disinfectant that you need to use. The next one in the item of first aid products would be this kind of stuff over here. You'd need to run some tape. You would also need to run a good gum guard. And I'm going to include this in the first aid kit, believe it or not. And I know we've got ladies sitting watching in the periphery. I'm sure you all know what this is. This is to protect the crown jewels. If you're going to be doing any form of contact training, I'd highly recommend one of those. Right. So the first aid kit's out of the way. Now let's get down to the nuts and bolts. I'm going to divide this evening's webinar into a couple of different spheres. The first sphere that I'm going to cover is the use of empty hands in terms of actually grappling, grabbing, punching, or striking, kicking, kneeing somebody else in a fight. Now, why would I cover this when we teach firearms, or why would I cover this when we teach impact weapon or edge weapon? Well, it is a key component in your training syllabus. Without this, your syllabus will fail. If you're relying solely on the use of a firearm to protect yourself, you are fooling yourself. I'm going to say again, if you're relying on the sole use of a firearm to protect yourself, you are fooling yourself. Not going to mince my words. Along with the equipment that I've just shown you, you're going to need some other important pieces of kit. I'm going to show them to you just very briefly. You're going to need some gloves. The type of gloves that I use, These ones over here are made by Title. I like the brand Title. These are gloves that allow me to grab and use a firearm or a knife whilst I'm striking or grappling with somebody. Good quality gloves. Another important piece of kit that you might want to have, especially if you're training with somebody when you start striking in that, is some sort of head guard where it protects your head, protects around the mouth and the jawbone. And why do I say that? Well, it depends where you are employed. If you can go to work with a slightly bruised eye, then it's fine. But you might not be able to work or go to work if you can't see out your eyes. Now, along with that comes a whole lot of other protective type kit. You can wear shin pads. I've got a couple of shin pads, which I'll show you just now. But the use of any form of protective gear in relation to empty hand type training, and I'm going to refer to the training as combative type training, where you actually are grabbing your opponent. You are going to be grappling with them at very close range, possibly using your elbows, hands, knees, or whatever you have to your disposal to fight with that opponent or opponents that you are going to be training with, trying to simulate a close encounter. So when it comes to the use of empty hands, you need to have the correct training equipment to go hand in hand with that, so that you can protect yourself and you can protect the person that you are training with or the persons that you are training with. If you need to know where to get any of this kit, I use a brand called Title. You don't have to buy Title. There are a couple of guys that sell this type of equipment, but extremely important. I'm going to talk about the training just now when I start putting everything together. The next area that I'm going to discuss is the use of impact type weapons. Now, what's important about the use of impact weapons is that it's the oldest form of fighting known to man. The very first type of fighting that man did was with the use of a club, and hence we become quite proficient in the use of impact weapons as human beings. I've just got a couple of things that I've brought along with me. First of all, this that I'm going to show you, this is a proper fighting stick. We have practice sticks that we use when we train. This is a fighting stick. That replicates the use of an expandable type baton. We then have slightly smaller objects which we use. These can be purchased locally in that. This over here is referred to as a combat banana. This is a very good persuasion tool. If people get too close to you, you can persuade them to go upon their own way and not get involved with you. This over here, a fancy tool called a reactor, also part of the impact weapon syllabus. And of course, when we discussed equipment, I did discuss in the last webinar how important it was to have a handheld flashlight so that you can use it in conjunction with a projectile throwing weapon such as a handgun. And if you are carrying a good quality tactical flashlight that you've got from one of these reputable dealers, then you should have one that you can train with. This isn't exactly the same flashlight which you carry, and it's designed to be trained with as it's an inert training tool. So if you're carrying a flashlight and you need to do some bag work, then you'd need to practice with the exact same tools that you'd be carrying on you. Impact weapon work also requires that of protection. And when we're working with impact weapons, we use a very similar bags to what we use for. This is a very simple strike shield. We use strike shields like this to strike against when we're training. This here helps me to be able to target, range, work movement, and it allows me to be able to hit at certain areas on my opponent, whereby my opponent is protected, and I can use a considerable amount of force when training to try and replicate that of real life training. Strike shields look very similar to this. This one made by Title. This allows me to kick, strike my opponent, and even use impact weapons against my opponent holding the bag, where they are a moving, thinking target, not just that they are standing still. So when we look at the impact weapon work, once again, you need to have what I discussed in the first aid pack, and that would be a very good disinfectant. This stuff that we use here, I like using this stuff over here. It's called cetamine. It's a very good disinfectant that we spray on all our kit prior to training, during training, and after training when we stow our kit away. Very good stuff to have. Going on to the next big area, or the big component of what we do in terms of the training that I present, and that is edged weapon work. When we're training with edged weapons, what's important about edged weapons is that we get to learn the length of the blade, we get to learn how it feels in the hand, how it moves when we're moving with it, how we can work with that edged weapon in close proximity to somebody else, especially when we've been caught off guard and we might be taken to the ground and somebody is trying to grapple with us, or they're trying to force us into a position of submission. Being able to access that blade and access it and use it requires a training blade. So I'm going to show you a couple that we run in terms of our training. This specific blade is one that I designed in collaboration with Xavier Knox, one of the top blade makers in South Africa. And along with this, he will also provide and supply you a training blade. And if you notice, this one's got holes in it and it's got a red handle, which indicates that it is a training tool. It's not a live blade. Okay. Very important that when you train with the training blade, it is exactly like the real deal in terms of everything, how it feels in the hand, how it moves in the hand, and where you carry it. Very important. The same when it comes to blue guns. In the last webinar, I showed you a blue gun and some holsters. Importance of having a blue gun and holsters is so I can carry it, so that whilst I'm training, it is exactly like the real gun that I'd be carrying in my waist. And in this instance, it's exactly the same as the real blade. Now, someone else who makes really fine knives is a chap called Harm. And he makes this knife over here. It's called the Shark. It's a folder, the Urban Shark. This specific model is called the Shark Tank. Folding blade, carry it every single day in your pocket. What you need to do is you need to have the trainer that allows you to train and access it. So that when you are under duress and someone is trying to beat the crap out of you, you are able to access this blade, put it into play to be able to protect yourself. Very important. Now, it doesn't have to be that fancy. Many, many years ago, I bought this very small little knife. I don't know if you can see it on the screen there. This is a Spyderco Cricket. It's one of the smallest knives you can carry. Perfect little tool. Now, you don't have to go out and buy the trainer. You can go and make one. This is out of Perspex. It's been made out of a very pliable type plastic. And if you put the two together, it's exactly the same size as the actual blade. So you don't have to go and buy one. The only problem with this is that it doesn't fold like the folding blade, and you need to be able to practice to access it. That's a little bit about the tools in terms of what you would require for non-firearm type training. If you're going to attend training either with myself or another trainer, and you're going to go do an edge weapon syllabus or seminar, I would highly recommend that you take your blade and a trainer which is exactly the same as the live blade, except it's a training blade. Now, we do use other blades to train with. Steve's on the group, and he'll tell you as well that what's important about training with all these tools that we've got here, whether it be an impact weapon or an edge weapon, is you need to get to a point where you are actually sparring with somebody that provides you a thinking, moving target, not just that the person is standing still. So for that, we use types of blades that look like this. These blades are designed for sparring, and both yourself and your training partner can spar and actually use the techniques and skills that you've been trained on and practice them live on somebody that's moving, somebody that's thinking, somebody that's as good as what you are. That way you know whether you've actually succeeded in your training syllabus or not. Right. Now let's talk about a very touchy subject. And this one here, I'm going to go on for a little bit on this over here. A lot of people that want to go into the area of being able to protect themselves in terms of self-preservation will talk a big talk, but they won't walk the walk. And what I mean by that is this, is that you do need to have some form of athletic ability to be able to protect yourself. If you are unable to protect yourself, then you are not going to be in a position to protect your family. And what I mean by that is that if you are unfit and you do not have the anaerobic ability to be able to ward somebody off, then the techniques and skills that you're going to be learning on a course are going to mean very little to you if you aren't able to actually last the duration of a very brief and violent encounter. Now in South Africa, I can tell you this, conflict here by criminals is extremely violent. It's extremely fast and it can be very confusing. And for you to win that encounter, you need to have some form of athleticism. Now, what I don't mean is I don't mean we need to go out and take out a gym contract and go to gym and pick up huge weights. But you do need to have some form of fitness level. And what I would recommend is I'd recommend some form of physical activity, some sort of physical training, whether it be walking on the beach, whether it be surfing, whether it be going out and having a game of squash. You do need to go out and exercise. A very important tool that I use for my personal training, which enables me to be good at what I do in terms of self-preservation and fighting, in terms of being able to grapple, is a good quality heart rate monitor. The ones that I use, the one that I'm holding up here at the moment is a Garmin Instinct. This specific one here, you put it on your wrist, it's charged. And what it does is it runs with your heart rate all the time. It will give you a resting heart rate and it will do everything for you. There's an awesome app that you load on one of your fancy phones. And what this does is it allows you to be able to monitor your training, and it actually assists you in tracking what you're doing. Very, very important. The one I'm wearing on my wrist at the moment, this is a Phoenix, an old Phoenix 2, just as good. Not as expensive, but just as good. Works just as well. I would recommend a good heart rate monitor. And we've got Doc Rumsimer here, and I can tell you now, he will tell you that don't go out and be training and not knowing what your heart rate is doing. You need to go and monitor that. Some of us are not getting any younger anymore. We're getting older. And we need to know what our heart's doing. And one thing I can tell you is that you need to read up a little bit about your resting heart rate, your working heart rate, and need to know how to set the band in which you need to be training. Guys, I cannot stress this enough. You need to go out and you need to do some form of physical activity. It is extremely important. The next thing that I want to make mention is that it's okay to go to the shooting range and train with firearms. It's great to come to the gym. Come and join me at Fort's Gym and come and do some impact weapon work. It's great to have all that. But what's important is that the area in which you need to be spending majority of your training is that in the area of empty hand training. You need to be able to strike, be able to take hits, and be able to at least hold somebody off if it goes to the ground and you end up fighting for your gun, or you're fighting to get hold of your edge weapon or access your edge weapon whilst on the floor. I cannot overemphasize this point. So by having all these toys out here and showing you the different bits and pieces, I want you to understand that to make you whole in terms of being able to protect yourself in a country like South Africa, or anywhere in the world for that matter, just at this point in time, you have to have athleticism, some form of physical training in terms of being able to be fit, relatively strong. You don't have to be the strongest person on the block. And you need to actually go out and spar, roll with somebody on a jiu-jitsu mat. Go and see what it's like. Because I can promise you this, if I set my watch for 3 minutes and I put you against somebody that's of equal size and equal ability, you will not last 3 minutes. You will be gassed. That I can promise you. Cannot urge you more than what I have done. Don't just focus on firearms training. Focus on the less than lethal ability in terms of being able to protect yourself, and those are starting with authoritative presence, good training in the area of empty handwork, which I refer to as combatives, not combatives, combatives, good impact weapon work, the use of oleoresin, capsicum, or pepper spray, and last resort, in terms of the use of lethal force, a good edge weapon. So I'm going to open the floor for some questions shortly, but one of the things I do want to just quickly get off the bat here, how many of you that are here tonight carry an edged weapon? Just put up your hand or give me a thumbs up on the screen. Okay, that's almost everybody carry an edged weapon. You're more than likely going to open up more cardboard boxes and cut more biltong with that knife than what you're going to cut any other person. You all agree. However, if you're carrying an edged weapon, it is a formidable weapon, especially for women who are at home by themselves. They know where everything is in the house. And if you are cornered in the house, an edged weapon can be a formidable weapon. But for you to be able to use it, you do need to have some form of athleticism, and you do need to know some skills on where and how to use it. Right, I'm going to open up the floor for a couple of questions. Just before I do that, is there anything that, Rids, would you like to add to what I've had to say?
Not at this point, Dean. Thank you.
Okay, Steve, I know you're sitting there chomping at the bit. Is there anything you would like to add to what I've said in terms of a person having athleticism as well as the knowledge, at least a basic understanding of being able to strike, take a couple of strikes, and possibly end up on the floor in a basic grapple? I'm not talking about a jits competition, just basic grapple.
As a Dean, trying to restrain myself to keep to your time limits. I think any one of these questions that come up could be an entire session in itself. But I think maybe if you can expand, I don't know if the question was going to come up, if you can expand on why you say someone requires the physical skills as opposed to relying on the firearm. And I think that might cover it.
Okay, that's a good point. The guys that are here tonight in this webinar, the headline for the advertisement was equipment. And yes, I've shown you a couple of pieces of equipment, and it's difficult showing it on the screen. It's easier when you come on a course. What Steve is getting to in what he's just said is that in most conflicts that take place, whether it be here in South Africa or anywhere in the world, most of them start at such close range that you will be required to use either empty hands or some other form of fighting skill to be able to earn the right to be able to access a weapon system. So you might be very good at a weapon system. You might be very good at a use of a handgun. You might be very good in the use of an edged weapon. But because the attacks are launched by means of surprise, they're using exactly the same techniques that are used by the military. Surprise, speed, and extreme violence in their action is used when they attack. You might be caught off guard, which means that you're going to have to rely on your ability to be able to ward them off or fight them off so that you can get the opportunity to access a weapon system. I hope that makes sense. Steve, did I clarify that in what you're wanting to hear?
Yeah, there is one other thing, and I know you're probably avoiding it because it is an entire long session in itself. But if you can briefly link in the Force Continuum on why you require these skills as opposed to just relying on the firearm or edged weapon or any other weapon system.
Okay. What Steve is talking about here is that in South Africa and in most democratic countries around the world, the use of force or the application of force against another human being is strictly regulated by pieces of legislation. And for us to have a guideline, a baseline upon which to work to be able to use force against someone else within the legal parameters of the country in which we live, we need to work very closely in line with what's known as the Force Continuum. I don't want to get too much in depth. I don't want to go too in depth in the Force Continuum right now because I have planned a webinar on the Force Continuum solely. But what I can say this is that the Force Continuum starts with authoritative presence, verbal judo, control holds and empty hand strikes, through the segment that we refer to as less than lethal. Guys, there is no such thing as non-lethal. Less lethal, and then the use of lethal force. Between the use of less lethal and lethal force, there's also the use of a dog. So I don't want to get too in depth in it, but for you to justify the use of lethal force, in some instances, I'm not saying in all, but in some instances, the use of other lesser options on the Force Continuum would certainly be favored by someone like Mr. Guerta if required for a statement and if required for evidence in court. So it is extremely important to know that there are other options other than lethal force. I'm going to challenge you, you guys. I want you to go out over the next couple of days. Let's say by the time we have our next webinar, and I'll ask this question. I want you to look at police officers or law enforcement officers or law enforcement officials or police officials or whatever you want to call them that you come into contact with. And what I would like you to do is I'd like you to look at their equipment belt that they're wearing around their waist. I want you to record what you see on that equipment belt. And on the next webinar, I'm going to ask you to tell me what you saw on their equipment belt. Is that a deal? All agree? Thumbs up on that, eh? Next webinar, I'm going to ask you, and you're going to tell me what you see on that belt. Are there any questions that you'd like to ask about the gear and not specifically the physicality side of things? And I have covered the physicality side of things. I've said that I feel very strongly about a person being able to at least hold their own in terms of their fitness levels. I'm not talking about going to gym and lifting huge weights and running hundreds of kilometers on a treadmill. I'm just saying basic athleticism is what's required. Because when you come on course and I'll ask you to be able to work with an impact weapon, you usually spend between 6 and 8 hours with me. And I can tell you that you're going to be moving a lot and you're going to be using and expending large amounts of energy on the course to be able to use that weapon system. So in the training that I'll provide, there will be simulations run that we try and replicate a contact or conflict situation that you would need to employ that weapon system. And it's just a taster of what it could possibly be. Right, going back to the equipment, are there any questions that you'd like to know about the equipment in terms of the empty weapons, empty hand stuff that I was showing in terms of the head guard? I've got some Shin Guards over here. These are the Untitled Shin Guards. We put these on when we grapple and when we fight. And as you get older, you start to realize that the harder I train, which is what we want to train really hard, but I've got to also train within a realistic level of force, because otherwise I don't get to train the next day or the day thereafter, because I'm now battered and bruised and I can't even walk the next day. And that obviously means that I will be suffering from what we call diminished capability, which is what I'm going to talk about on my next webinar. Any questions, guys? No questions? Gee whiz. Okay. Right. I haven't shown all the impact weapons, Manar. I don't have a kosh on the table here, but a kosh, or a SAP as it's called here in South Africa, is a very good piece of equipment. Unfortunately, there's only one company still making them, because if you mention the word kosh or SAP, it's showing your age. Sorry about that, bud. Any other questions, guys? Anything you would like me to cover about the equipment? All good. Mr. G, anything you would like to add about that equipment?
Thank you, sir. I'm ill-equipped to comment on any of the systems you've discussed. I have to wholeheartedly agree on the physicality and the cardiovascular strength and fitness, but perhaps comment on your escalating needs. Do you start off with a weapon, a force weapon, a penetrating weapon, etc., etc.? Where do you start? Where do you escalate to? In what order and what training should you be competent with before you go to the next step? It's all fine and well for me to have a projectile-based weapon system, but without anything behind it, once I lose that, I'm completely out the fight, as it were.
Okay. When I set out and I run courses, usually starting in around about January and ending in December, those of you that have trained with me, and Mr. G, you'll agree, I usually start off at a very slow pace in January, picking up the pace as I go through the year. Here by December, get to the end of the year, and the courses that I've run would have progressively got more difficult. What I try and do is all the training I present, there's a theoretical component and a practical component. In the theoretical components, I'll make reference to some research or training that I would ask members to go and read up on, or to go and maybe study a little further themselves, so as that we can have more time. I can have more time presenting contact material as in practical, and less time doing theory. And that's what I'm hoping to achieve by running these webinars, is that if someone was to go and watch them, they would then be able to come onto the courses better prepared. Having said that, all this training, everything that we've been talking about from the first webinar to this webinar, is of very little importance unless you attend the next webinar, which is the most important one, and that is awareness. The next webinar is going to be on awareness. If you're not aware, you will not be able to fight your way out of anything, because you won't even know you've walked into it. So the next webinar is going to be on awareness. The webinar after that is going to be on the Force Continuum. And that is where we employ various levels of force to counter an unlawful attack upon your person or your family. Having said that, I am of the firm believer that the very first course that a person should attend with someone like myself at FUNDIKHONO and someone like Rids is that of an impact weapon. And the reason why I say impact weapon is because they are all over. They lie around all over the show. It's not just carrying a collapsible baton like the one I've shown you, which is this one over here. Once it's collapsed, it's portable, and I can carry it with me all day long. It doesn't have to be something as cumbersome as a proper fighting stick, like this one over here, known as an nduku or an inuis. So what happens is that I try and convince people to come on an impact weapon course first, whereby they can carry something that's small enough that it's portable, but yet coupled with the correct training, the correct introduction to having the correct mindset and training, a little bit about awareness, they lead better armed, that if I don't ever get to see those people again, they never ever come back and train with me, at least I've been able to provide them with some form of personal protection. So I like to start off with impact weapon training. That is the first port of call for me. After that, I like to provide training in the area of pepper spray or oleoresin capsicum. And the reason being is that that is the easiest thing to go and purchase in South Africa. You can walk into any store, even a sports store at the moment. Sportsman's Warehouse is selling pepper spray. 10% oleoresin capsicum is what they're selling. But once again, it requires training. It requires knowing how to use the actuating switch, how to prepare it before deployment, and post usage in terms of decontamination for yourself and possibly other persons who are not meant to be sprayed. So the training along with the pepper spray is just as important as the use of a firearm. Training is key. I obviously like to present courses on edged weapons. However, edged weapons and firearms are both regarded as the use of lethal force. And Mr. G, you've attended lectures with Mr. Botha, and he would have told you that it's even frowned upon where a person, or if they have to being forced to use an edged weapon, can get you into an area of some troubled times where you'd need his services. But I do like training edged weapons, especially to women. The reason being is in the home, most women don't carry any form of weapon system with them, but it is easily accessible because in the kitchen there's knives, and if they know how to use a knife, if they know how to break a glass correctly, they have an edged weapon or two edged weapons as an improvised weapons, and they can protect themselves with that. Does that answer your question, Mr. G?
Yes, thank you very much, sir. Much appreciated.
100%. Anybody else would like to ask a question? Vanna, you're very quiet. You want to ask any questions, bud?
All good, thanks, Dean.
Troy, you want to ask any questions?
I'm all good, thanks, Dean.
Okay, bud. Manar, want to ask anything? Okay, what I would like to do is just before we start getting close to finishing, I just want to show you a couple of things in terms of the setting up of some of the equipment that you might carry. So what we're looking at, Jazz, is we're looking at edge weapons. These specific ones here were made by Xavier Knox. This one here, he calls the retainer. Myself and Ridwan have carried these extensively. It is a very good tool, can be carried and concealed very easily. But if you look at the trainer replicates the actual live blade in all the dimensions. But the key is not just the blade itself. The key here is actually the scabbard that it's carried in, the sheath that it's carried in, or the scabbard. If you can see, the clip that's on there is exactly the same setup to the clip on the live blade. It's very important so that when I'm training and I strap the real blade on and I'm walking around outside there in the real world, when I'm training with something that's exactly the same. The only difference is it doesn't have a live blade. Now what this does is it allows me to go and train with someone like Steve or with Ridwan, and what it allows me to do is it allows us to take our training to the next level, whereby they launch an attack where I'm not aware that the attack is going to be launched, where they take me down to the ground, and now I'm having to fight to the point where I'm able to access this here. So a lot of trainers will teach you how to take the blade and they'll teach you about all the angles, and they'll teach you how to use the blade or an impact weapon. They'll teach you how to use the angles on an impact weapon. They'll teach you where to strike. They might even include a little bit of sparring. But that's only half the story that they're teaching you. What you need to also practice is you need to practice being able to access that weapon system when under duress, when you're having to fight to just just stop someone from hitting you. Just stop someone from doing what they're doing, or create a gap large enough that you can access a weapon system. That's where the training actually needs to be taken to. Now, whether you're doing this with an impact weapon, pepper spray, edge weapon, or firearm, it's just as important. And that's where you need to be with your training. If you're relying on having the gun already in your hand or having a free draw, I call it a free draw. That's a freebie. A freebie is when I'm standing on the shooting range, I'm not concealed, the gun is in its holster, it doesn't have a mechanical locking device. And when the pro timer goes beep, I draw the gun and I put 2 rounds or 3 rounds into a target in, let's say, 1 second at a distance of 7 paces. That's a freebie. But when the gun is concealed, it's in some sort of retention device type holster, whether it be passive or it have a locking system. And because it's concealed, you're caught off guard. The person has struck you with something. You've gone down to the ground and they're on top of you and they're busy kicking pieces out of you. Then you need to be able to access the weapon system. That is the difference. That's where you need to take your training. Now, don't say you need to take it to that level where your training partner beats up on you. Stephen and myself and Ridwan and I train quite regularly, and we don't need to take it to that level, but we do need to take it to the level where you're caught unawares and you're able to learn how to find a space and time to be able to access a weapon system. You do need to do that. And to do that, you need the tools, what I've shown you here on the table tonight. That's including a head guard, because you do take strikes to the head. You need a box to protect the crown jewels, and a little bit of tape just to make sure that because you're going to pick up some hemo Twinkies. Trust me, you're going to get a couple of grazers here and there. Then, of course, when it comes to the edge weapons and that, you need to be able to carry them in such a way, like the firearm, that you can access it. So that's why all the stuff needed to be shown tonight. And then, of course, the cleaning agents, because you do sweat and you do end up smudging off on your training partner, and you're going to need to clean each other down. Now, often people ask, myself and Steve will ask Ridwan and I when we train, are you people really mates? Because we do take it to a level where you do need to put on, I see Abdul Razak's laughing there, but people ask us, are we mates? Because you do need to just dial it up a little bit and be able to fight to earn the right to access a weapon. Sorry, Rids, I see your hand up there, bud.
Thanks, Dean. I know you spoke about access, and leading up to access, something that I find very important, and I often start with this when I'm doing a lecture of some sort or a training intervention of some sort. Before the access is the setup. So where do I place specific tools on my belt? And even if I'm not wearing a belt or a duty belt, I mean, I personally could wear a leather belt, I could wear a Cobra belt to the shooting range, or when I'm at work, I use a proper duty belt. But for me, it doesn't matter, even if I wasn't wearing a belt, because I found ways to position my defensive tools or my weapons in certain spots so that I know where they're going to be. I also set up my duty belt or my belt in line with the use of Force Continuum, which you will get to later on. But what's important for me is, as the threat escalates, my counter force can also escalate. And it's a systematic approach to it so that I don't fumble and have things in the wrong place. I don't have to move back and forth. And I know where I start from and I know where I finish. Thanks, Dean.
Rids, very good points. The equipment setup and where we place the various tools which I've shown you here on your person is extremely important. Which brings me to the transition between force options, which I haven't discussed yet, because that comes into a different area in terms of training. But being able to transition from an impact weapon, because the situation unfolded such that you cannot use lethal force. You can only use an impact weapon at that space and time. It escalates to the point where you need to use lethal force, And as it escalates to the use of lethal force, you need to be able to transition from a less lethal to a more lethal force. Or you've drawn a weapon, a pistol, and this happens a lot to police officers. We draw a pistol to get a person to submit to doing something. They were doing something where they've had a knife in their hand, they've had a firearm in their hand, or whatever the case would be. Once I've drawn that pistol and they've now, the threat is diminished, I need to lower my level in terms of preparedness back down to something that's more acceptable. Not only is acceptable by law, but you must remember, everybody's got cell phones, everybody's got cameras, they're watching us. So being able to transition from one weapon system to another weapon system without thinking of where to access it. Now, one of the things that I've practiced over the years is the accessing of a folding knife. I don't know how many times Steve and Ridwan will bear me out. We go and we spend a lot of time in different places where we see people carrying folding knives in their pocket. And then I'll say to the guy, what knife are you carrying? Oh, I'm carrying a CRKT, or I'm carrying a Benchmade, or gee whiz, Harm built me this knife. You know, I waited a year for it and I've got the knife. And then you ask them to show it to you, and this is what they do. If it takes you that long to open this, trust me, the fight's already over. So you need to practice on how to open the knife. So I remember taking Neil to a blade shop. We spent about an hour back and forth on blades. And one of the most important things that I said is that you must be able to open this one-handedly. You must be able to access it and open it one-handedly. For that, I need to practice it. That's why I have this. Menar, small kosh for you, bud. Sorry, Ridge, you got your hand up. Thanks.
Yeah, Dean, I also wanted to mention that a number of people that come and train with us often have gaps in the gear setup. So you find that they jump from less lethal to lethal without considering the options in between. And also what they don't cater for is the ability to de-escalate. So now like you say, I've drawn the firearm, and it comes to a point where the firearm's not relevant anymore. I mean, in my close protection career, I've been in more incidents where I've had to use my ASP baton and had to use OC spray than having to use a firearm, than having to shoot somebody or shoot at somebody. And even in situations where I've been in ambushes where the suspects had explosives, sometimes you don't have to shoot them because they put it down and you can now arrest them. And then that leads to another point where a lot of our students, even many of them being law enforcement officials, don't think about what happens when I need to restrain this individual. What am I carrying on me? Am I carrying handcuffs? Am I carrying some other means? Carrying one pair of handcuffs isn't realistic in the environment that we operate in today, where you have multiple suspects. Is that going to work for me? Thank you.
Riz, one of the things, and guys, this evening, one of the things I did not include on the table here is a very broad topic, and I'm not going to get into it. I'm just going to touch on it. And I know Steve's he's watching the clock and he's telling me, he said 40 minutes, and we're 45 minutes into this one, 47 minutes into it, is the ability to restrain somebody. If you go and you spend any time doing a little bit of boxing, a little bit of judo or jiu-jitsu or any form of contact sport, you will know that it's extremely difficult to restrain somebody. I run handcuffing courses, I run various restraining type technique courses, and a lot of people ask me, but I'm a civilian, I don't need to know that. That's what the police need to know. These days, if you come and attend a lecture by Jacques, we get statistics from Stats SA. The statistics are at the moment, 4 people perform home invasions with a spotter outside and a driver of a getaway car. You need to know how to restrain people, and you need to know what works and doesn't work. So be on the lookout for some of those courses, whether I'm running them or one of the other top guys in the country are running them. You need to be on the lookout for them. Guys, are there any questions before we start wrapping it up, or anything you'd like to say? Anyone got any input? Gladly accepted.
As a dean.
Okay, Abdul, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to know when you guys are going to be having the official first course back after the lockdown, back whatever course it is.
Okay, I'm going to let the cat out of the bag. Myself and Ridwan are planning the first course for the first week in next month. It's going to be a combo course. We're putting two courses together. We're going to be doing the handgun owners operators, which is where Rids and I like to start, and coupling it with the intermediate course. So it's going to be a whole day. I would urge you to, you having been here for the last couple of webinars, will definitely put you into a better position to enjoy the course and get the benefits out of the training that we're going to be presenting. So yes, it's going to be the first weekend into next month. We've gone and sorted out the shooting range, and there's a couple of things that we need to do in terms of taking people's temperature, preferably before the course, because otherwise they're going to be hot. You're going to need to sign a document to say that you COVID-19 free, you haven't, you don't have any signs and symptoms, and we're going to have to keep our social distancing, which we normally do on the shooting range anyway. And yeah, we will not be able to braai or share any food or anything at the shooting range, or drinks or refreshments. So you need to bring your own. Menar's hands are going there. Oh no, I know Menar. But we're going to be running the first course first weekend into next month. We've got permission to go ahead and run it, and it's going to be running. So yes, share the word. Please tell everybody. I think it's the 4th of next month. Somewhere around there. I will be advertising it and be putting it out on Facebook and on email. Menar, is there something you wanted to say? I saw the hand going there, bud. Just shout out.
You know, it's nice to run a session without a lot of
No, we can't hear you.
No, Menar, just hold on. There's something wrong with the speaker there or the sound. Just do a test there quickly, or just type it up to me and send it to me. I'll check it on the screen. No, there's some feedback somewhere there, Menar. There's feedback on your system there, bud. Any other questions or anything, guys? I know whilst Menar's typing, I suspect he's busy typing where he's going to send me a WhatsApp quickly.
Nothing from my side, but thank you very much, sir, as always.
Hope you enjoyed it, Mr. G. Dr. Ramsona, how are you? You're very quiet there.
Yeah, must say it's quite informative. I just like to have a beginner's mind and listen. So don't mind me sitting in the corner, just listening.
No worries, Doc. Thanks for joining us, sir.
And I said, just wanted some advice on how a normal individual would dress carrying all of this gear.
Menar, got the question. The question was this. Menar would like to know, and Rids, I hope you're listening. Steve, I hope you're listening. Just wanted to know, how would an average person, a normal person that everyday Joe would carry a lot of this equipment in everyday sort of business and walking around? I mean, it is a lot of gear. One of the things I do want to say before I open it to Rids and Steve, just to chat about it, Menar, I don't carry all of this equipment on me all the time unless I'm on duty. I do, however, carry at all times. I will have a flashlight, which is clipped into my pocket. I will have a folding knife, at least one edge tool, clipped in my folding pocket. I will usually have a pistol in an inside the waistband holster and at least one spare magazine. That's my EDC. If I'm going to be going into a troubled or a place where I'd be expecting a bit more trouble than that, then I would obviously increase the equipment. Additional magazines, maybe, depending. When it comes to the carrying of edged weapons and that, you also just got to be careful what you're carrying. If you have a look at any of the edged tools that are on the table in front of me, either made by Xavier Knox or made by Harm, you will not find any logos etched on them. You don't want anything on these tools. The same as the flashlights. You don't want too much on them. It's nice just to have an acronym RRT2 on a flashlight. It doesn't have, that means nothing. The same as the edged weapons, and also any of the impact weapons. You don't want any specialized encryptions on them, guys. Okay? Don't want something on there, sort of kill them all, let God sort them out. That's not the kind of thing you want on anything, especially if it ever gets found and it goes and becomes an exhibit. Rich, you want to just elaborate a little bit more before I ask Steve to elaborate in terms of carry?
Yeah, okay. For the everyday guy, I mean, we all are everyday guys when we are off duty, when we're walking around the mall and the park and the beach with our families. And for me personally, I carry the exact same setup as you do, Dean, and you know that. And it's not specific to a certain pair of pants. Even though I own 511s and true specs and I own Johnsons and I own all types of stuff, I'm very comfortable wearing a normal pair of jeans, and I can carry the same equipment in the very same manner and honor about the same place. What we can bear in mind is that just because you're not carrying a full duty rig doesn't mean you don't have different levels available to you. For example, a good quality flashlight would double as an impact tool. It's not made primarily to be an impact tool, but I believe that something that's versatile is worth more. But to the contrary, I'm also the type of person that it's ironic, but I'm the type of person that pays more to get less. And some of my clients don't get what I'm saying when I say this. And this is what I'm saying. If I was to buy a flashlight, I'd look for the most simple flashlight that actually does as few things as possible. I just want a light that comes on when I need it to come on and goes off. I don't need strobe. I don't need a power light that tells me when the battery's gonna die and all of that stuff, SOS and things. So I'm willing to pay more money for a good quality tool that offers me less features, because now there's less that can go wrong. And also I can put it to use in other ways without there being a complication of some sort or reliability issue. And you will learn as you go along that you can drop certain things because there is much more that you're empowered to do. Now you've got empty hand skills. So you don't really need a baton if you're walking around with your family. You've got your hands and your legs and your knees and your elbows. That should be good enough for most situations. You might not need handcuffs. I know our good friend Steve is very crafty with some restraining devices that he can make, and maybe you're going to show them on an upcoming video. So you could carry some of those things, and there's always a way. So I know we started off years ago, and Lukman and I had this discussion once, and I said to him, you know what, I wish I didn't even have to carry a gun. I wish I lived in that perfect world where I wouldn't carry a gun, because I don't want to, but we're forced to. So we've found ways to carry less but enable ourselves to do more with those few items. Thank you.
If there's anything you want to say on this topic before I start ending off.
Yeah, I think another relevant point to be mentioned is specifically with regards to the look. If you running around, and I do wear 511s a lot of the time, but if the specific style of what you're wearing is some sort of tactical BDU type pants and, you know, combat boots and, you know, all the latest Gucci tactical gear, it stands out. It's extremely noticeable. You know, you kind of want to try and look like everyone else. You want to be the gray man. You want to blend in. Obviously, you need gear to support that, appropriate belts and holsters when it comes to firearms, so that, you know, that it's concealed within the attire that you're wearing in the environment you find yourself in. Also, sometimes you can't carry what you normally would. For example, if you're going to the gym or if you're at the beach to go surfing, you know, it's hard to run even a EDC type belt and firearm, you know, if you're out surfing kind of thing. I'm sure there's some people who do it, but, you know, it's not exactly ideal. So you might find yourself having to use other options where you may be carrying an edged weapon, which doubles as an impact weapon. So you kind of have a lesser lethal and sort of more lethal option, and you don't have your projectile weapon, which is another reason why you might want to invest some time in gaining some of the other skills, such as the empty hand things, because you might find yourself, due to the environment you're in, it's not practical to have a firearm, for example, or any other weapon system. So, you know, all valid points. You don't want to look like you prepared for World War III. That will tend to attract it. You know, you kind of want to look like everyone else, a person of no interest or description whatsoever. And the gear which you've mentioned on previous sessions is particularly relevant to that because it assists that objective.
Thanks, Steve. Guys, just a couple of things. The choice in these less lethal approaches is quite important, in that if you were to, and what Rids and what Steve are talking about here is instead of carrying a kubaton like this, if you choose the correct folding knife, this clasped in the hand will do everything that this can do and more. So by me carrying this folder, by me having this one designed and made and manufactured by Harm for me, this over here is my impact weapon. It's also my edged weapon. And when you go on course, you'll be taught, based upon the Force Continuum, I'm more than likely going to use this tool like this first before I even open it. If I'm forced to open it and have an edged weapon in my hand, what's unfolded in front of me and developed in front of me has got me to the point that I've now had to open this and use it as an edged weapon, if that makes sense to you. So I can carry this and it can fulfill 2, if not 3 different types of functions. So it's very important that we know that. The other thing that was touched on by both Rids and Steve, to a certain degree, more so by Steve, is that where we carry these on us, and what Manar's talking about is, imagine trying to carry all of this on you. We don't carry all of it. We need to be selective. And what works for me in terms of edged weapon might not necessarily work for you. And what works for you in terms of impact weapon might not work for me. You need to find your niche and what you would like to carry on you. And I highly urge you to do that. Don't just buy something because the trainer tells you to buy this because it's good. It needs to work for you. Then, of course, where you hide it on your person is important. I'm holding up this one over here. Do you see it's got the pocket clip on the outside over there? See that, guys? This here can be seen a mile away when it's sticking out of a person's pocket. You can see these days who's carrying knives on them because it's usually in the right-hand pocket. Remember, there's a 90% rule that I teach. 90% of the people around the world are right-handed. So if I look in the right-hand pocket or look on the right-hand hip, that's where I'm going to find the firearm. If I'm going to look on the inside of the left ankle, that's where I'm going to find the firearm. Okay? So this clip over here is a dead giveaway. So if you're wanting to conceal this, what you want to do is you want to actually have it stuck inside your waistband, okay, and stuck with the belt concealing it, hidden from plain view. And the best place to carry any weapon system on you is not in the pocket, it's on the waistband. The reason being is that most attacks that are currently being launched on Durban beachfront on unsuspecting people is they'll run up and grab and hold you around the arms, preventing you from using your arms. And when they do that, your hands are usually at your waistline, which means I can access this. But if it's in my pocket, I can't access it. That makes sense, guys? Right. Any other questions before we say goodnight and call it a wrap? Vincent, you're very quiet there, bud. Have you got anything to say? Anything you'd like to add? Any questions, mate?
I think if I had to add anything, I would be taking away from everything that's already been said. All is absolutely 100% positive and very good stuff, guys.
Thanks, mate. I appreciate it. Anybody else like to add anything? Troy, Werner, have you got anything to say, bud? Are you very quiet there, sitting on the outskirts here? How are you?
Yeah, I'm all good. Thank you very much, Dean. Enjoying the conference. Thanks.
Yeah, man. Neil, anything you'd like to say up in Cold Richards Bay?
No, all good. Thanks, Dean. And once again, thanks for an awesome webinar. I think it's informative and it's just enlightened our awareness of the equipment that we should be carrying. And yeah, thank you very much.
You're very welcome, mate. You're welcome. Troy, anything you'd like to say, bud, before we start shutting down?
No, all good. Thanks very much. Very informative. Do you have any idea of when you would be looking or be able to start doing some of the less lethal courses? The hand-to-hand stuff.
Yes, we will be looking at doing them after we start the what do they call it? They're relaxing the lockdown regulations. We're going to be kicking off with a firearm-related course first weekend into the new month, and then we'll have a look and see by then. In the next 2 weeks, they should start relaxing some of the regulations in terms of us being able to grapple and move around and start getting a little closer than the requisite. I think it's 1.5 or 2 meters now. We have to be, yep, 1.5 to 2 meters. And unfortunately, in our world, that's far too far away. When we do our empty hand stuff, we literally got to be able to grab each other and sort of grab arms, grab hands, and then end up on the ground. So if we can just give it another 2-3 weeks, then we should be able to start moving in that direction. Hey, Rids, do you agree? Got it.
Great stuff. I'll keep an eye out for that then. Thanks.
Yeah. For those of you that are on tonight, there's some new guys, Mr. Havenker. What we're going to do is just pop me your email address, send it to me on my number, please. I don't have all your email addresses, and when I send out adverts, some of them are not getting to everybody. I've only got phone numbers, so please just make sure that I have your email address. And then, of course, please check out Facebook. I am on Facebook. I try not to post too much stuff on Facebook. Facebook is a double-edged knife, as we know, double-edged sword. I do put out adverts on there. And then go and check out the YouTube account for those of you that have missed the previous webinars, or you want to go check out some vids on some of our training. Go and have a look at the Facebook page. And we can't wait. Rids will be back in a couple of days, and we'll kick off with some good, awesome training. And you guys want to start with some firearm stuff, like I said, first weekend into next month, first course for after this COVID-19 stuff, and we're going to do it. Guys, thanks for joining me. Thanks for popping in, and I look forward to seeing you guys soon. Please be on the lookout for the next webinar. It's going to be a good one. It's all about awareness, and it's probably the most important one of all of them.
Thanks, Dean. Thanks for the lovely